When my grandson told me I wasn't welcome for Thanksgiving dinner, right in front of his wife and children, I nodded politely and spent the evening at my desk. By December, everything from their mortgage to the college fund was under review. A true story from Boise City, Idaho. Betrayal had to be punished. Justice had to be restored. You won't believe what I did next. My name is Walter. I'm 74 years old. A retired banker who spent 40 years managing other people's fortunes. I learned early that trust builds wealth, and destroys it too. This is my story, a true story of family betrayal and noble revenge. The turkey was golden, the laughter warm, and I, the man who built 3 generations of stability, was seated on the sidelines of my own family's Thanksgiving. My grandson Eric, ambitious, sharp and newly proud of his suburban mortgage, looked across the table at his wife Melissa, image-conscious, brittle, then at me. The air smelled of rosemary and pride. "Grandpa," Eric said carefully, the way bankers say no while handing you a pen, "Melissa and I think it's best if you skip Thanksgiving this year. You know, give the younger folks their space." His words fell soft, but the silence after them was steel. Melissa smiled politely, as if she were approving a policy. Their children, Ava, 10, sweet, observant, and Max, 7, cheerful but cautious, froze mid-fork. I nodded. Not a tremor in my hand, not a word in defense. "I understand," I said. "After all, every generation has its turn." They mistook silence for surrender. I stood, adjusted my tie, the one Eleanor had given me 40 years ago, and looked once more at the table. Every plate gleamed, every glass sparkled, every eye looked anywhere but mine. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said quietly. No one stood. No one followed. I left with my dignity. They kept the dishes. Outside, the Idaho wind stung my face sharper than age. Snow fell like ash over the streetlights. At that moment I realized Thanksgiving wasn't ending. It was beginning. That night, the quiet in my house was a kind that hums, the sound of distance tightening its grip. I hung my coat on the rack Eleanor once insisted was too formal for a banker. The house didn't answer. Houses don't when you've been erased from their laughter. The clock ticked its soft arithmetic. I brewed coffee, black, steady, patient, and sat at my desk. Eric's voice replayed in my head like a poorly balanced account. "It's best if you skip this year." A polite exile, stamped and notarized by pride. I looked at the old family photo on the shelf, Eric as a boy on my shoulders, hands stretched toward the sky. I had paid for his schooling, co-signed his first home loan, and opened the college fund that now carried his children's names. I chuckled once, not in bitterness, but in calculation. I pulled the filing cabinet key from my drawer, the same one that had never failed me in 40 years of balancing ledgers for people who trusted me with more than money. Inside, the file smelled like time and truth. I reached for the brown folder labeled Eric. Trust account 2010 present. The paper rustled like a confession trying to stay folded. Interest statements, mortgage records, college fund transfers. I read every line as if I were auditing a stranger's loyalty. I found what I needed, not proof yet, but a pattern. Patterns always speak louder than apologies. I closed the folder, set it in the center of my desk, and whispered to the air, "You wanted space, Eric. You're about to get it from the bank." The audit had begun, and he didn't even know he was on the books. If you're listening now, stay with me. This isn't just my story. If it speaks to you, please like, share, comment, and subscribe so someone else can hear it. Tell me where you're listening, over morning coffee or late at night. Now, this is where my plan begins. The next morning, the sun dragged itself over Boise like an accountant with a hangover. Slow, unwilling, exact, I wore my gray wool coat, the one Eleanor had sewn a new lining into the winter before she passed. It fit tighter now, but dignity has never required comfort. The frost on my windshield caught the light like broken glass. I brushed it clear with the same patience I once used balancing ledgers. Revenge, I've learned, needs the same rhythm, one careful sweep at a time. At the bank, the marble floors still echoed the same way they had when I worked there. Some sounds never change. They just stop belonging to you. "Walter," said Clara, the young, courteous, overconfident branch manager. "What brings you in today?" "Reviewing some family accounts," I said evenly. "The family trust and the educational sub-funds." She nodded, typing quickly, the keyboard chirping like a nervous bird. "I'll pull up the most recent activity." "Are you still the primary custodian?" I smiled.
"By law and by blood."
Her eyes flickered at the screen, then paused. A pause I had seen 100 times in my career. "Something didn't match. Is there a problem?" I asked. "No, sir," she said too quickly. "Just verifying." The printer clicked awake, spitting out a transaction record. I recognized one name, a firm I had never approved. Marin Asset Services, LLC. I folded the paper neatly, slid it into my coat pocket, and thanked her. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. The world was still. When a storm pauses, it isn't over. It's calculating. So was I. Later that day, I laid the printout flat on my desk. The name Marin Asset Services, LLC stared back like a stranger pretending to be family. The amount, $82,400, transferred in 3 installments from the Langford Family Trust. Each payment labeled Administrative Adjustment. Administrative, my foot. The address matched a property management office across town, one Eric had once mentioned as a side investment. I smiled. Side investments have a way of turning into sinkholes. I called Gerald, a retired auditor from my banking days, meticulous and loyal. "Gerald," I said, "I need a favor. Quiet and thorough," he laughed. "Walter, you still keeping people honest?" "Just one family at a time," I said. He agreed to look up Marin Asset Services through his old channels. While waiting, I pulled the old trust binder off the shelf, the one Eleanor and I drafted after her cancer diagnosis. She'd insisted on equal shares for all, but Eric had convinced me to let him manage the trust's modern investments. "You've earned some rest?" "Grandpa," he'd said. I'd believed him now, that rest was over. The phone rang an hour later. "Walter," Gerald said, voice low, "that LLC is registered to Ridgeway Avenue. Guess whose name's on it?" I didn't answer. He did. "Eric?" For a long moment, the only sound in my study was the clock marking betrayal in seconds. Eric hadn't just uninvited me from Thanksgiving. He'd been feasting off my life's work, behind my back. And that was when the real Thanksgiving began. 2 days later, I ironed my shirt, polished my shoes, and drove to Eric's house. Revenge begins best in daylight, disguised as civility. Melissa opened the door, her perfume stronger than her welcome. "Oh, Grandpa," she said, smiling thinly. "Eric didn't mention you were coming." "I know," I replied. "That's why I came." She hesitated, then stepped aside. The house smelled of pumpkin spice and ambition. From the kitchen, Eric appeared, sleeves rolled up, voice cheerful, eyes already defensive. "Grandpa, this is a surprise." "I was nearby," I said, taking a seat before being offered one. "Thought I'd check on how your investments are doing." The word landed like a whisper under a spotlight. Eric laughed, too quickly. "You mean the family trust?" "Everything's fine. You don't need to worry about all that stuff anymore." "I never worry about what I understand," I said, sipping the water Melissa reluctantly handed me. "But lately, I've been wondering if everyone else understands it as well as I do." Melissa busied herself at the counter. Eric's smile began to sweat. "Grandpa, you've done so much already," he said, rehearsing sincerity. "We're just trying to take some pressure off you." I nodded, stood, and placed my empty glass on the counter. "I appreciate that, Eric. Truly." Then calmly I added, "I stopped by the bank yesterday." The pause that followed could have frozen a river. Eric blinked. "Oh, for what reason?" "Curiosity," I said. "And numbers. Both have a way of telling the truth." He swallowed. "I see. Yes," I replied. "I suspect you will." Outside, the winter sun caught my windshield. Inside, Eric had just learned what silence sounds like when it's loading its weapon. That night, the phone rang just after 9. Gerald never called late unless the truth had teeth. "Walter," he said. I pulled the tax filings. Marin Asset Services isn't a property firm. It's a holding shell, inactive for 3 years until Eric re-registered it last spring. I listened, saying nothing. The clock ticked between us like a metronome for betrayal. Funds from the family trust were rerouted there under administrative fees. Once transferred, they paid off a private mortgage and a credit line, both in Eric's name. I wrote every word in my old ledger as the same one that had once held the savings plans of hundreds of trusting families. The ink didn't shake. It never does when anger steadies the hand. "Can you verify amounts?" I asked. $82,400 to the cent, he said. He's been smart, Walter, but not smarter than an audit trail. I smiled faintly. No one ever is. After we hung up, I opened the family Bible on the shelf. Eleanor's handwriting on the first page read, "Truth and time always meet, Walter. Let them." I closed the book gently and looked toward the window. Across the neighborhood, families were stringing Christmas lights. Eric's house was among them, glowing, confident, oblivious. I folded the papers neatly into a new folder labeled Evidence, Private, and locked it in the drawer beside the ledger. When I switched off the lamp, the reflection in the glass didn't look like a grandfather anymore. It looked like an accountant at the end of grace. The following Sunday, I opened a new ledger and titled it, The Thanksgiving Reckoning. The pen clicked shut, and the audit of blood was about to begin. Monday morning, I woke before dawn, not out of habit, out of purpose. The house was cold, the kind of cold that reminds a man what he's built and what's been taken. I brewed coffee, opened the curtains, and let weak Idaho sunlight spill over my desk. In front of me lay the folder, Evidence, Private. Each page was a breadcrumb and a trail Eric thought he'd buried under digital dust. But bankers don't bury the truth. We reconcile it. I called Gerald first. "Morning, old friend," he said. "Do you sleep at all?" "Long enough to remember who I am," I replied. He chuckled. "Then I assume you're ready." "I'm done being ready," I said. "I'm beginning." We set up a compliance request. Quiet, surgical, irreversible. Within 48 hours, every transaction touching Marin Asset Services, LLC would be audited by the internal review team I once trained. Next, I emailed Banking Commissioner Karen at the State Banking Commission. She owed me one from a lifetime ago. Subject, Trust Review Inquiry, confidential. Body, need discretion. Audit trail attached. Don't ask how I got it. You'll see enough. My phone buzzed a minute later. Karen, I see the attachments. Are you prepared for a forensic? Me. Prepared? I wrote their manual. Karen. Then I'll assign a quiet team. No press, only signatures. Outside, the snow had stopped. Inside, justice started moving. As the printer hummed, spitting copies of Eric's transactions, I whispered, "Never steal from a man who taught you how to count." I filed the printouts under a new folder. Action, Reconciliation. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was accounting. The moral kind. The meter had started. Interest on betrayal compounds fast. 2 days later, I walked into the same mortgage office where I'd co-signed Eric's first home loan. Printer, ink, and pride. Same smell as the day he promised to handle it. Behind the counter sat Simon, a salesman's smile with a ledger's memory. "Walter," he said, standing. Haven't seen you since the merger." "I don't damn anyone before the paperwork's read," I said, shaking his hand. "I need the mortgage file, including recent payment histories," he frowned. "Those are client confidential, Walt." I slid my brittle old banker's ID across the counter. The plastic had yellowed. The name hadn't. He sighed and typed like a man who didn't want to know the answer. He turned the monitor toward me. "Refinanced 3 months ago. Higher rate. Down payment sourced from, well," he squinted. "Marin Asset Services, LLC, that ring a bell?" I nodded once. "It does now. Everything legal, I assume?" "Legal?" I smiled faintly. "Yes, moral? Different ledger." He printed the file, slipped it into an envelope, and handed it over like a priest passing confession. Back in the car, I looked at the numbers. Numbers never lie. People do. I started the engine, heater groaning awake. "Let's start your audit, Eric," I said, page by page. He built his walls with stolen bricks. I just turned on the light. Sunday morning, I called Eric with the softness he expected, the kind that lives between surrender and strategy. "Eric," I said, "you were right. I shouldn't worry about the accounts anymore. Let's have dinner." "Just the family," he hesitated. "Dinner?" "Yes," I said. "Thanksgiving may have been too much. Christmas is coming. Let's start over." He exhaled. "That means a lot. Melissa will be happy. We'll come by next weekend." "Wonderful," I said. "I'll cook something simple, like Eleanor used to." I hung up and smiled. Not from joy, from precision. Then I called Gerald. "It's time," I told him. "By next weekend, I want every document verified. Trust transfers, mortgage payments, any signature touching Marin." He chuckled. "Serving justice with dessert?" "Exactly," I said. "They'll eat what they cooked. I spent the week preparing. Not the meal, the presentation." 3 folders, labeled Clean, Exhibit A. Marin Transaction Report, Exhibit B. Mortgage Payment Verification, Exhibit C. Trust Ledger. My co-trustee signature still active. Beside them, the family Bible and Eleanor's photo. I wanted Eric to see what he'd stolen. Not just money, but belonging. The invitation wasn't to dinner. It was to disclosure. Let me pause for a moment. If you've stayed with me this far, you feel this betrayal as I do. Would you forgive or fight back? Tell me in the comments. And while you're here, like, subscribe, and share this with someone who believes family should be unbreakable. What comes next will change everything. By Wednesday, the kind of motion you can't see was humming under the floorboards. I arrived at the bank after opening. Clara at reception smiled. "Good morning, Walter." "Morning, Clara," I said. "A bit of housekeeping. I met Daniel in his office, a man who used to work under me when I managed institutional portfolios. He stood when I entered. Respect you don't ask for. You earn it in 40 years. Retirement treating you kindly?" He asked. "Kindly enough," I said. "I'm here on a trust review. Some transactions need clarity." I handed him Exhibit A, printed clean, annotated in my handwriting. He adjusted his glasses, scanning figures. Then he stopped. "These ran through the family trust?" "Correct. By your grandson?" "Also correct." He looked up. "You know this could trigger a forensic?" "That's why I came," I said. "Truth is a habit, not a request. Freeze could cascade," he warned. "Let it," I said. "Fear keeps bad math from repeating." Within minutes, the notice was filed. The paper feed Word, a machine turning honesty into process. By noon, confirmation, a temporary freeze on all family trust withdrawals pending review. I folded the document into my coat. "Happy Thanksgiving." "Eric," I whispered. Outside, the Boise sky was clear, the calm before realization. The button was pressed. Consequences were en route. The first scream wasn't Eric's. It was Melissa's. Thursday, as early winter gloom settled, my phone buzzed. "Neighbor Mabel never calls without a reason. I just saw Melissa at the grocery," she murmured. Card declined. 3 times. She looked like the floor vanished. "That," I said, tracing my teacup's rim, "is arithmetic correcting arrogance." Mabel chuckled. "Then I suppose the storm's starting?" It was. An hour later, my landline rang. "Caller ID, Eric." I let it ring twice. "Grandpa," he said, voice tight, "we're having issues with the bank. There's a problem with the trust accounts." I said nothing. "Did you—" He stopped. "Did you request some kind of review?" "I didn't request anything," I said evenly. "I verified everything." He exhaled hard. Melissa's furious. Her card stopped. The mortgage auto-pay bounced. The college funds locked. "This looks bad, Grandpa." "For all of us, does it?" I asked quietly. "Or does it finally look accurate?" Thick, choking silence. "Why are you doing this?" He whispered. "Doing what?" I said. "Teaching you that integrity has a price tag?" He muttered, frustration, fear, maybe shame, and hung up. I set the receiver down gently. In my world, panic is just another line on the ledger. Eric's account had finally gone into overdraft. The freeze hit the cards. The truth was about to hit the table. By Saturday, frost glazed the city, and the family was drowning in whispers. Mabel said the neighborhood chat buzzed. Eric's company on hold. Melissa's cards dead. Bank trouble. Gossip spreads faster than interest ever compounds, and this time, I didn't add a cent. I spent the morning polishing Eleanor's dining table. Every groove held a memory. She used to say, "This table will outlive our mistakes, Walter." She was right. It would host one more. At 5 p.m., the phone rang again. "Eric, we're still coming for dinner tomorrow," he said cautiously. "We need to talk." "Good," I said. "There's a lot to discuss. Can we make this private? Just family?" "Of course," I said gently. "Just family." He didn't realize the truth was family, too. And it had RSVP'd first. That night, I placed exhibits A, B, C beside the family Bible. Eleanor's chipped wooden cross sat at center. On the mantel, a photo of Eric as a boy, the day he opened his first savings account. His grin could have lit a room. Tomorrow, That light would flicker under the weight of his own greed. I poured a single whiskey, raised it to the photo, and said, "Tomorrow, you'll meet the banker you created." The night before the dinner, snow fell again, slow, deliberate, merciless. Justice was on schedule. Dinner would be the audit. Sunday evening arrived dressed like peace but breathing like war. The knock came at exactly 6. I expected punctuality. Guilt rarely arrives late. When I opened the door, Eric stood in a gray coat, Melissa 2 steps behind. Her smile was brittle. His was missing altogether. Ava and Max peeked from behind her scarf. "Come in," I said. The food's warm. The table glowed under candlelight. Turkey, potatoes, pie, all the usual symbols of family, laid out like witnesses. In the center, Eleanor's wooden cross, 3 tidy folders, and the family Bible. Eric eyed the folders. "What's all this?" "Records," I said. "The kind that never forget." We sat. The children ate quietly. The room was heavy with what no one wanted to say. Halfway through the meal, I set my fork down. "Eric, do you remember when you opened your first savings account?" He blinked. "Of course. You helped me fill out the forms." "I did. And I told you something that day. Do you remember?" He hesitated. "You said, 'Every dollar tells a story.'" I nodded. "Good, because some of yours are about to start speaking." I slid Exhibit A across the table. Marin Asset Services, LLC, color drained from his face. Melissa froze mid-breath. "Eric," I said evenly, "this is where you redirected the family trust. And here," I tapped Exhibit B, "is the mortgage history. Paid with stolen money." Melissa's fork clattered. Ava stared at her father, wide-eyed. Eric swallowed. "You had no right." "Correction," I said. "I had every right. I built the fortune you plundered. The silence that followed was worth every empty Thanksgiving." The food went cold. The truth didn't. Eric's hand trembled as he reached for the paper. He skimmed the first page, then the second, breath shortening with each line. "Grandpa," he said, voice cracking, "you went behind my back. You sabotaged me." I leaned back, steady as the mountain air. "No, Eric, you sabotaged yourself the day you stole from the hand that raised you." Melissa's voice wavered. "Eric, tell him it's a mistake." He slammed the pages down. "It's not what it looks like." "Then explain," I said calmly. "To the bank it looks like embezzlement. To the trust it looks like fraud. And to me," I held his eyes, "it looks like betrayal in a necktie." He rose halfway, fists shaking. "You think you can ruin me?" "I don't have to," I said. "You already did. I'm just turning on the lights." Melissa buried her face in her hands. "My God." I slid Exhibit C toward him. The trust document with my co-trustee rights. Read the signature line. "You forgot who's still listed as primary." His eyes flicked to the page. Disbelief collapsed into dread. "You froze the accounts," he whispered. "I didn't," I said. "The system did. After compliance read your trail, I only gave them the map." He sank back, staring at the table like it was a grave. Ava's small voice broke the silence. "Daddy, did you take Grandpa's money?" The words hit harder than any gavel. Eric's shoulders slumped. Melissa looked away. I folded my hands. "Dinner's almost over, Eric. Your education's just begun." By Monday morning, the echo of dinner had already turned into consequence. Banks don't gossip. They report. And when they report, the world starts to listen. Gerald called just after sunrise. "Official now," he said. "Internal reviews public inside the bank. All sub-accounts under Eric are frozen. Mortgage company notified. State auditors peeking at Marin." I sipped my coffee. "Paperwork travels faster than guilt, Gerald," he chuckled. "You always said numbers never lie." "True," I said, "but people eventually believe them." By noon, Karen phoned. "Preliminary review opened," she said. "Eric's name is on a misappropriation file. Discretion. For now." "For now is long enough," I said. "The lesson's begun." Outside the air was sharp and still. Snow covered Boise like truth. Cold, quiet, impossible to ignore. Across the street, Eric's car stayed in the driveway all day. By dusk, Melissa drove off alone with the kids. I watched the taillights fade. Not satisfaction. Stillness. The kind that comes when balance returns to the ledger. That night the doorbell rang. Mabel stood there with a pie and a whisper. "He's falling apart," she said. "Everyone's talking. But you look peaceful." "I'm not peaceful," I said. "I'm accurate," she smiled sadly. Same thing in your world. For now, I said. When she left, I turned off the lamp and sat at my desk. The numbers were done speaking. Tomorrow, I'd decide if the man who wrote them still deserved a place at my table. The city knew the math. Eric was about to learn it. Thursday, just after 9, 3 slow raps. Hesitant, guilty, familiar. I knew that rhythm. When Eric was 10, he knocked like that after breaking a neighbor's window. This time it wasn't glass he'd shattered. It was trust. I opened the door. He stood there, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow from a night without sleep. "Grandpa," he said softly. "Can I come in?" "Of course," I replied. Thieves deserve warmth, too, before their trial. He winced but entered. I led him to the same chair where I'd taught him to balance a checkbook. Symmetry has a memory. Melissa took the kids to her sister's. He muttered. "She needs time." "I don't blame her." "You shouldn't," I said. "You gave her a crash course in financial ethics." He stared at the floor. "I never meant to steal. I thought I could move funds, pay them back later. You weren't watching. I figured it wouldn't matter." "You figured wrong," I said, voice low. "Money isn't what you took. You took dignity. That debt collects interest." He swallowed. "I lost everything." "Not yet," I said. "You still have one thing left." He looked up. "What?" "Opportunity," I said. "Tell the truth before the world finishes counting for you." He nodded slowly. A single tear slid down, the first honest balance sheet I'd seen from him in years. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Prepare yourself. The audit isn't over. It's moving to the human accounts next. The next signatures wouldn't be on checks. They'd be on character." We sat in silence, the mantel clock keeping score like always. Eric rubbed his hands. "What do you want from me?" "What I've always wanted," I said. "Honesty, accountability, and your signature, this time on the truth." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I opened evidence, private. Inside, 3 clean sheets and the pen that had signed more mortgages than most men read. "You'll write a confession," I said evenly. "Every dollar, every date, every lie. Then you'll sign it. You'll also write apologies to the trust and to your children. Not as a criminal, but as a man who finally found his reflection." His throat tightened. "And if I don't?" "Then the banking commission will file it for you," I said, "and your children will meet their father on the evening news." He stared at the blank page. "You'd do that?" "You already did," I said. For a moment, nothing moved. Then he took the pen and began to write, slowly at first, then faster, words spilling like withdrawals he could never undo. He pushed the pages toward me. The signature shook. The truth didn't. "Done," he whispered. I read the first line aloud. "I betrayed the man who trusted me most." "Correction," I said softly. "You just started to earn him back." Confession filed in ink. Sentence pending in deeds. Morning frost thickened over Boise like a clean page waiting for ink. I set Eric's handwritten confession beside the family Bible. Dates, sums, signatures, apologies. Not just a document. Repentance in 12-point font. At 9 sharp I called Gerald. "It's done," I said. "He confessed," Gerald whistled. "File it officially?" "Not yet," I said.
"First, it needs a witness. Quietly. Permanently." That afternoon I walked to Daniel's office.
His secretary waved me through. Daniel stood when I entered. "I heard the review expanded statewide." "It will," I said. "But this—" I slid Eric's letter across his desk. "Belongs in the private ledger." He read the first paragraph, exhaled, and looked up. "He actually wrote this?" "Truth is contagious," I said, "even in men who ran out of courage." Daniel nodded. "We'll store it in the audit record. Not public, internal, but permanent." "That's all I wanted," I said. "A memory stamped where it can't be erased." I left without triumph. Accuracy feels quieter than victory. That evening I walked past Eric's dark house. Curtains drawn, no lights. The silence that follows after pride declares bankruptcy. At home, I poured a small whiskey and faced Eleanor's photo. "It's done," I said. "Every number is reconciled." Her smile in that picture looked almost alive. I knew the revenge was complete. Now came the harder part, forgiveness. The books balanced. The soul's ledger was next. 3 days passed before the second knock came. Not the guilty rhythm from before. Slower and emptier, like a man learning how to ask. When I opened the door, Eric stood alone on the porch. No coat, no excuses. The December cold did what pride wouldn't. It humbled him. "Grandpa," he said, voice raw, "they put me on leave. Melissa took the kids to her sister's for the week. I don't know what to do." I stepped aside. "Come in." He sat at the edge of the sofa like a schoolboy waiting on a grade. His hands wouldn't keep still, mine did. I set a cup of tea in front of him and the family Bible between us. "I filed your confession with compliance," I said. "It's not public." "It is permanent," he nodded, eyes shining. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," I said. "You haven't paid," he swallowed. "How?" I slid a single page across the table. 4 lines. No adjectives. Terms of repair. Full restitution to the trust within 12 months. Read-only access for me to every account tied to your name until the children finish college. Written apology to Ava and Max. Placed in this Bible. Monthly meetings here. On time, no excuses. He read it twice. "Can I do installments?" "You can be honest," I said. "Installments come after that." Silence held. The clock ticked an old promise. He reached for the pen. The signature shook, then steadied, the way a bridge learns to hold weight. He looked up. "If I do this, will you ever look at me the same?" "No," I said. "But I will look at you again." Outside, the wind pressed its ear to the window. Inside, my house belonged to me again, because the debt finally had a name. He had signed the terms. He hadn't paid the soul yet. 2 days later, a small white envelope arrived. The handwriting was crooked and careful. Ava's. Inside were 2 letters, Ava. "Dear Grandpa, Dad said sorry to us." He cried. He said you were right and that he forgot what family means. I told him that means saying sorry with actions. "I hope we can have pie together soon. Love, Ava, Max. Hi, Grandpa. I miss your stories. Dad says we'll come over soon. He said you fixed everything." I told him you always could. I sat in my chair, the letters trembling slightly in my hands. For the first time in weeks, the silence felt gentle. I set the envelopes beside the terms of repair. Eric's signature still drying. Eleanor's cross caught a beam of morning sun. The clock ticked softly, no longer keeping score. Forgiveness isn't quick. It arrives like the first thaw after a long winter. Slowly, uncertainly, but undeniably. "Eleanor," I whispered. "They're learning." That afternoon I baked an apple pie, heavy on cinnamon. I set 3 plates and poured 2 cups of tea, 1 for me, 1 for the woman whose patience built this family, and 1 waiting for whoever had the courage to knock next. Outside, snow melted along the porch rail. Inside, warmth returned to the house. Betrayal had left cold. Sunday. Pie cooled on the counter. A decision cooled in my chest. The first Sunday of December the knock came again. Lighter this time. Careful, almost hopeful. When I opened the door, Ava and Max stood bundled in coats, 2 sizes too big. Between them was Eric, holding a pie dish and looking like a man who had finally run out of excuses. "Hi, Grandpa," Ava said shyly. "Hi, sweetheart," I replied. "Come in before you freeze." The kitchen warmth wrapped around them like forgiveness trying to remember its shape. Eric set the dish on the counter. "Melissa baked this. She wanted you to know she's sorry, too." "I believe her," I said. The act speaks for itself. We sat at the table, the same one that had witnessed betrayal, revenge, and now something harder. Healing. Eric kept his eyes low. "I made the first transfer," he said quietly. "Half is already back in the trust. The rest will follow each month until it's done." "Good," I said. "Restoration begins with the first payment, not the last." Ava swung her legs beneath the chair. "Can we do Thanksgiving together next year?" "Yes," I said, "but this time we'll call it something else." "What?" Max asked. "Reunion," I said, "because that's what this is." Eric looked up, tears bright in the candlelight. "Thank you, Grandpa, for not destroying me." "I didn't spare you," I said softly. "I spared your children." Money moved first. Now the words had to. Dinner was simple. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, apple pie that filled the room with cinnamon and memory. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was healing. Halfway through, I placed the family Bible in front of Eric. "Page 100, I said. He opened it. Between the pages sat his apology to Ava and Max, folded beside Eleanor's old bookmark. He read aloud, voice trembling. "Ava, Max, Your father forgot that the money he guarded belonged to love first and numbers second. Grandpa taught me that trust is the only currency that grows when shared. I promised to earn it back, one truth at a time. Love, Dad. Neither child spoke. Ava reached for his hand. Max leaned into him. Melissa's name wasn't spoken. Her letter lay at the door, sealed with one word: forgive. Eric folded the page carefully, tears falling to the Bible's edge. I set my hand on the cover. "This house has seen enough betrayal for a lifetime," I said. "From now on, it will remember grace." He nodded, unable to speak. Outside, the wind shifted softer, a December breeze carrying the last traces of a long war. Inside, laughter flickered again, faint but real. Justice had done its work. Now mercy could take over. The Bible closed. My heart's door wasn't yet. That night, after they left, I didn't turn on the lights. The house glowed on its own, from the echo of laughter missing for years. The table was still warm. The plates were empty. The Bible lay open where Eric had read, and Eleanor's cross leaned gently against it, casting a shadow like a signature. I walked to my desk, the same desk where this storm began. Evidence. Private sat there, thick with truth. I opened it one last time, not to relive what was taken, but to confirm what was returned. Receipts, transfers, confession. Every number lined up clean. I pulled a red pen and wrote 3 words across the final page. Account closed. Paid in full. I placed the pen beside it and closed the folder for good. Through the window, Eric's car rolled slowly down the street. Ava's small hand waved from the back seat. I lifted my hand in return, though she couldn't see me. Forgiveness doesn't need witnesses. I poured tea, not whiskey. I wanted clarity, not comfort. The clock struck 10. "Steady as my breath, Eleanor," I whispered. "The balance is restored." The wind outside was quiet, the kind of quiet that sounds like peace when justice finishes its work. I smiled, not the smile of victory, but of understanding. Tonight, the banker in me finally retired. The grandfather in me came home. The books were closed. The lesson wasn't. Some of you might wonder if I ever regretted it. The audit, the freeze, the humiliation. The truth? Not for a moment. At 74, regret becomes a luxury. Clarity becomes company. I didn't ruin my grandson. I rebuilt him. The hard way. The honest way. Sometimes love has to arrive dressed as consequence before it can wear forgiveness. When Eric told me I wasn't welcome at Thanksgiving, he didn't just exclude a man, he erased a legacy. He forgot the hands that built the roof he calls his own. I reminded him that every new foundation still rests on old beams. Justice gave him a mirror. Forgiveness gave him a reason to look into it. If this sounds like your story, if your own blood turned its back, don't shout, don't beg. Wait, let truth do its work. Time collects debts people think they've buried. When it does, let mercy sign the final check. I closed the ledger and left it on my desk. Not a trophy, a reminder. Love can be stolen. It can also be restored. Betrayal began my story. Revenge wrote the middle. Forgiveness. That was the signature. If you take anything from this old banker's tale, take this. Patience isn't weakness. It's the interest that turns pain into peace. If you believe love, respect, and dignity are stronger than greed, pride, and betrayal, share this story. If it touched you or made you think about family, choices, or second chances, please like, subscribe, and share your story in the comments. I read every comment. Thank you for listening. One ledger left to balance. Thanksgiving. A year passed. The house looked the same, modest, clean, warm, but peace had a new scent. Apple pie cooling on the counter. Children laughing in the living room. It was Thanksgiving again. This time I carved the turkey. Eric stood beside me, steady, humble, quiet. Sleeves rolled up, eyes softer. Every so often he glanced at me, not for approval, but for permission to keep trying. "Grandpa," he said, setting a platter, "we couldn't have done this without you." "You're mistaken, Eric," I said. "You could have, but you didn't." Melissa came from the kitchen with Ava and Max, all 3 carrying plates. No one avoided my eyes. The kids had made paper leaves for the centerpiece, each with one word. Ava, forgive. Max, learn. Melissa, restore. Eric's leaf was blank. When I asked why, he said quietly, because the word I'm still earning doesn't belong on paper yet. We bowed our heads. No speeches, no toasts, just quiet gratitude. I looked around the table and saw what revenge never promised but forgiveness delivered. Balance. As we ate, snow began to fall. Slow, silent, honest. Later, when the house emptied and the dishes were clean, I wrote one final line in my journal: the debt of love was repaid with humility. And this time the account will stay open. For joy. I closed the book, turned off the lamp, and whispered into the stillness, "Happy Thanksgiving, Eleanor. We made it home. The account stayed open, not for debt, for joy."